Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Frames for Thought podcast. My name's Alex the Animator, and with me as always is my good friend...
Mark the Actor.
And today, we're going to be talking about style, reference, and some basic techniques. How not to get stuck in style traps, making sure you're shooting reference, and other good stuff to know. Let's roll. How do you find your style, Mark?
When it comes to acting, basically it's sort of instinctual, I would say. A lot of people are kind of driven one way or the other. Style comes, when it comes to the theory of acting, back in France, I want to say in the 1800s, if not before, there was two acting schools that opened up, and there was the School of Fire and the School of Ice. And that sort of breaks down into Fire being a lot of energy, fast-moving, fast-paced, high-energy type acting, whereas Ice was a lot cooler and a lot slower and a lot...
Could you say it's like actions versus drama?
Well, I would actually break it down into comedy versus drama.
Comedy and tragedy?
Exactly. It's sort of the basics of theater in general from the Greeks. So, yeah, it comes down to tragedy and comedy. And then obviously from there, things evolved and got a lot different to the point of, Stanislavski method, things like that kind of started to pop up. But when you're finding your style for yourself, what you have to learn to do, and it's probably the most important thing to do when you're trying to learn, is that you have to say yes to everything. Even if what your instructor is asking you to do from a professional acting standpoint doesn't make any sense, or you feel a little bit uncomfortable, say yes. Now, if they're asking you to do something that's completely inappropriate, like get naked in front of the class, you have every single right to say no. But if they're asking you to make eye contact with your partner more, or to speak slower, or to speak softer, or to use your body more, don't resist it. Accept it. Say yes, because it's going to help you grow as an actor to kind of open yourself up to a whole bunch of different experiences. And what I found in my personal life is that one style of acting works much better for these type of shows, and this style of acting works much better for these type of shows. You're going to find that for yourself, and it's good to find it out as early as possible and kind of get used to the concept of trying new things, trying new techniques, and expanding your repertoire at an earlier stage in your career. How about with animation?
Oh, well, there's a few buzzwords that kind of come into mind right out the gate, and it's like Disney, Pixar, it's Marvel, comic book. Just right out the gate, there's so many. When people think of style in animation, one of the things that's so important is not to fall into the style trap early. And what I mean by that, don't try to make your animation look like Disney or Pixar or Marvel or this, that, the other thing, because you want to be able to develop your own style. If you're mirroring your style off of another, let's say Pixar, for example, each Pixar movie is styled differently, right? Like the animation isn't always the same. Same with Disney, right? I mean, you could argue that they animate on twos, or they used to animate on twos or threes a lot more, right? But I mean, if you're going to be imitating a style, it should be for the purpose of learning or improvement, or so something to benefit yourself, using it as a tutorial or of some kind. You can try to reach that high bar of quality for sure, but you shouldn't be trying to, if you're a student especially, base all of your work and trying to mimic like high level studio work, because what ends up happening is you fall into this trap, this style trap, where that's all you can focus on. You want all your work to look like this and do like that. And one of the things you have to remember is that these projects, movies, films, TV shows, they're worked on by hundreds of people. A lot of animators and compositors and storyboard artists, everybody working in tandem to bring this vision to life. So to say, I want my style to be the Disney style, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because there's hundreds of animators that work for Disney collaboratively, and as a team, they can make a film that looks very stylized. On their own, you're going to get something that looks very different. Their animation isn't always going to look like a Disney movie. Some of them will prefer much rougher animation. Some of them will prefer a different kind of animation altogether. I was doing a portfolio review the other day. We got on topic talking about the Mitchells versus the Machines, and there was a student who wanted that to be their style. And I kind of told the student to pump the brakes a little bit. I said, that's great. But as I said, literally just seconds ago, there was a team of animators that made that style and brought that style forward. And it's great that you want to emulate that style, but focus on the animation first. Get it feeling the way that you want to feel, and stylize it after. Stylize it to fit the project. Don't spend so much of your time worried about what your particular style is, because the more that you do something, the more you is going to shine through in that particular project. So if you're drawing lots and lots and lots and lots, eventually when you do draw something, let's say that you've been drawing for decades and somebody wants you to draw a Star Wars picture. And so you draw a Star Wars picture, and it's going to come out in a way that only you would draw it, unless somebody specifically says, I'd like you to draw me as a Star Wars character, as if I was in a Disney storybook, right? That's different, because then you're emulating something. But if you're looking for a particular style, and your own style, that's something that has to be developed over time. Like, you yourself have to be able to come through your work. And the only way that you're going to be able to come through your work is through you doing the work, right? If you're constantly mimicking a Disney style or a Pixar style, and you're tweaking it so that it looks just so all the time, then there's no you there. There's no your style. It's going back to the Disney style, right? And again, I'm not saying that Disney has a bad style or Pixar has a bad style, but as an animator, especially somebody who's in school or fresh out of school, or somebody who's struggling with the I can't find my style or whatever, it's just keep going, because it's gonna shine through. You just gotta persist. When it comes to animation, that's what I mean, like, by a lot of buzzwords. I even remember being in school when I was doing 2D and like doing my pencil and paper animation, and I was like, man, I don't know if I could just do 8 seconds of like classic Disney style animation, that would be amazing. And like right there, I fell into the trap as a student, because I put other people's animation so high above my own, and I wanted to emulate that animation. What ended up happening on some of these assignments was that because I set the bar too high for myself right out the gate, that I forgot about all the basic foundational work that needs to go into it first. And so a lot of the stuff that I ended up doing early on felt really stiff, or it was rigid. It didn't have the life or the bounce that it needed to read well as a particular animation. And a lot of my instructors at the time would tell me the same thing. Like, don't focus so much on style. Just focus on doing the animation. Style comes later. Style comes later. And I wonder now, I'll bounce this back to you. And are there any buzzwords that kind of come up when you're talking about style and acting?
Not so much.
Like method?
Well, I was going to talk about method in a second, but when it comes to acting, usually if you're rehearsing a show or you're doing a scene, what you hear a lot of the time from directors and other actors is like, oh, you came off like Amy Adams in that scene, or you came off like Jake Gyllenhaal in that scene. So you don't really get told about a particular like style of film unless that's something you're going for specifically. Like if you're doing you're in the middle of doing Shakespeare, but you're acting like a musical theater person, then maybe you'll hear it. But typically what I've heard in the room is specific actors and whatever that means to that person or that instructor who said it.
Somebody would say like, that's so Belushi.
Yeah, I talked about him before, but I get referenced to Chris Farley all the time. For me personally, my big style, when I get a scene and I'm working in class or I'm working on stage or I'm working on set, my go-to is high energy, big choices, big movement, type acting, which benefits me because a lot of directors like that. Because instead of telling you to make a choice, I'm already making a choice, and they're telling me to either like, that wasn't the right choice, try something else, or can you bring that down a little bit? It's too big, which is typically what a director wants to do. They don't want to bring it out of you. They want you to show them, and then they want to kind of condense it and control it for the show. A personal story of mine is that when I was at studio, I was doing a production, and I played the husband and his wife's mother, or mother-in-law, I guess to me. She was getting the early sets of dementia, and that's what the story was about. I had a director named Richard Wolf, who is a fantastic local theater person here in Vancouver. Love the guy. He described for me perfectly what it is I do on stage and how I need to fix it. I've been through, like, I think a combined 5 to 6 years of theater school, and no one's ever put it in perfect phrases for me, but except for Richard. He said, Mark, when you're on stage, you're like a supernova. You just blast your energy out everywhere, and then for some people, it's just so overwhelming it knocks them back. I need you to be more like a black hole. I need you to take their energy and pull it into you. And now I don't know why this worked for me, but once he said that, I was like, I get it. Like, I get exactly what he's saying. Now everything that they've been telling me in classes makes complete sense to me. So it's all about bringing that inwardness to my performance. Again, I said this before in a previous episode, comedy on stage was my big thing, and comedy is a lot of big energy stuff. Another thing about style with acting, and this is going to go into method acting. As an actor, as a director, as a whatever, you have to respect other people's styles, and they need to respect yours as well. When you get on stage, when you get into an ensemble and you're performing, most of you will already have a somewhat similar style, but there's always some outliers who do things a little bit differently. And out of respect for them, you have to sort of let them go. But at the same time, if they cross a line, it needs to be brought up. What I'm talking about now is a reflection of Jim Carrey when he was on the set of Man on the Moon. It's sort of notorious. There's a biography about it on Netflix if you want to check it out. Because Jim Carrey went full method on it. From the moment he arrived on set to the moment he left, you had to refer to him as his character. And that's all he would be throughout the entire process of filming this. And he went so extreme with it, it became a nightmare for everybody else involved, to the point where the director had to call him and try to convince him not to act like this. Without having that respect, and that's how I interpret it, and that's how a lot of people have interpreted it, Jim Carrey not having that respect of the rest of the cast as well as the director, he refused to tone it down. And that made for...
He took it too far.
He took it too far. There's a certain limit. Daniel Day-Lewis is a method actor as well, but he does it in such a way that it's so respectable and honorable, and it's about the art, and it's about the entire show coming together. Where if you watch the behind stuff with Jim Carrey with Man on the Moon, a lot of it seems so self-indulgent, and it's difficult to watch it and not see and not get frustrated. For me, if I was on that set, I would be putting on a smile the whole time, because that's how you kind of keep the peace. But I know I'd be gritting my teeth the whole time, because it's so... I shouldn't say disrespectful, but it feels really disrespectful coming from that, because he's the big star, so he can do whatever he wants, and a lot of people just need to shut up or they lose a job. For me, I find that a very hostile acting environment, and I'm sure that there's people's performances that suffered because of it. That was a lot of stuff.
Anything else that pops out other than method? Like, are there other acting styles that people can practice or train into?
Well, there are specific things, like, so musical theater, the level of camp and style of musical theater stands out. It's very different from a lot of other shows. And I'm talking about your standard musical theater show. Obviously, there's some that don't fit this mold, but it's always that sort of big, campy, over-the-top, cartoonish type acting for a lot of them. And that takes time to figure out. On the same side of that coin as musical theater is theater for young people. A lot of your scripts in theater for young people, and I'm talking like young people, it's very over the top. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's very campy because the whole idea is to just get kids to focus on that and give their parents a break and just
Keep them engaged.
exactly. When I was doing Panto, it was very similar. We were encouraged to go over the top. We were encouraged to. So that kind of helped me with my style, just being able to interact with all of them. But I know for other people, that was awkward for them and it didn't fit their style of what they like to do. Can't really think of anything else that's really too different. I mean, you could look at something like action films and like horror films and stuff, but they all kind of have the same basic foundation. It's just that kind of script that changes everything and changes who your character is going to be.
Right. So it kind of just depends on how you choose to play into your character.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. Because I mean, you can be put inside of a action film and play it comedically, play up the camp of it. But at the same time,
could I give you an example? The difference between Tom Cruise's character Ethan Hunt and his character in Tropic Thunder.
Well, but see, so that's a genre thing again. So,
Okay.
Ethan Hunt is
So that has nothing to do with style.
When I think of style, I'm thinking about I'm not thinking about the genre. Genre
Okay.
acting is, in my opinion, different. But I guess it could count. In my opinion, genre acting is different from style. If you're to approach a genre-specific style of theater or film, you have to kind of understand the tropes of it. You have to kind of understand the pacing of it. And you have to kind of understand your part in it. For example, horror movies have a lot of red herrings, right? Yeah, there's a killer running around and everything points toward this person, but it's actually this other person. So depending on which one of those two types you're playing, the red herring or the actual killer, you have to act different specifically based on that.
The old Scooby-Doo trick.
Yeah, exactly, old Scooby-Doo trick. A villain in James Bond is different than a villain in Transformers, right? It's two different style of villain. But at the same time, too, then, you have styles of acting inside of these genres that go against the trope. Iron Man 3, right? Everyone, including myself, was really happy to see the Mandarin in there. And throughout the entire film, they're building up the Mandarin to be this big evil bad guy. But then it turns out it's just Ben Kingsley being a drunk theater actor who's being paid to pretend to be the Mandarin the whole time. Flips it on its head. He's not actually as intimidating as he's supposed to be, and he's just some guy.
What a twist.
Yeah, it's a twist, you know. I personally don't think genre fits into style.
It just kind of like we just mentioned. It's how you approach the role.
Exactly. And your way of approaching is going to be different than mine. It's all relative. I mean, I think it's just more when it comes to style, it's sort of your foundation, like how you enter whatever part you're given, like your first couple steps. That's your style. You know, if I was to get a call from my agent and they were like, "Hey, listen, so and so dropped out of this project for Flash, and they need you to go in there and do it," I would just go back to my basic style of what I'm supposed to do. I'd read the script and be like, "Oh, okay, so this is like my basic bad guy stuff," you know. So then I would get myself ready in that regard.
But you would also get feedback.
Well, you get feedback on the day for sure. And I mean, like when it comes to film, when they send you an audition or you know, usually just the audition, they'll give you a breakdown of what they want the character to be. Sometimes they'll even reference other actors or other, and this kind of goes back to what I said before, when you're in acting class and like, oh yeah, you were very Amy Adams in that. Sometimes you'll actually get like an Amy Adams like character will be your description of the character, because that's what they're kind of looking for. But then sometimes you can change their mind. So if you don't feel like you can play a good Amy Adams, have Amy Adams in your back pocket, but maybe go in as whoever you are and see what happens.
That happens sometimes in animation as well, where it's like the director thinks that they want a certain thing, but you just have this thing in your brain, like a brain bug. It's like, no. It has to be this way. And then you show them that way. And sometimes it's a big hit, but other times the director's like, nah, we thought of that. Like, it can't work with this one. But it's usually always worth the shot. Sometimes it shows the initiative, right?
And that's what a lot of people in the creative world want to see. And this is what I was saying earlier about my style being big choices and a lot of energy. It's a style that lends itself to theater very well, because directors, again, they don't want to have to pull it out of you. They want to see it and be like, oh, this guy's making big choices. About 90% of these choices don't make sense or are not what we want, so we're going to get rid of those. But at least they're trying something. At least they're putting in some effort.
I'm going to jump in off that and say that there are very similar things in the animation world, and one of the most important things that you learn to do as an animator is shoot reference, right? Because when you're talking about like a role description where it's like this part is very Amy Adams, right? So you can reference Amy Adams in that context, right? So you can go watch her do those things, right? That can serve as your reference, your template. But in animation, sometimes you don't always have that template. So in Frozen, for example, when Olaf the snowman is doing all of his dances and his dance moves, his skipping and all of this, if you watch behind the scenes stuff or if you watch the animator shot breakdowns, they're doing all of that. They're doing the cutesy little dances with the eyes and the little hands. You know, when Anna knocks on the door for the "Do you want to build a snowman?" and she has her hands up by her mouth. You want to build a snowman? Like the animators are doing all of that. They're shooting reference when they go to sit down and actually do the scene with the models and the characters. They can draw from that. They can bring it into the shot. They can look at it. They can time it appropriately and have all of the rough blocking layout ready to go. And then when they have it in a workable state, that's when they can stylize it and polish it to look like the Disney style of Frozen, right? But initially, it's just them with the reference. And one of the most important things for students to learn is to shoot that reference. Shoot it from different angles. You know, if it's a jump or it's a run, if you're just going to make a character run towards a railing, grab the railing, and they vault over top of the railing, like that's a pretty complicated series of movements. So make sure that you shoot it so that you know where the feet go. How high do the hips swing? Does the arm lock when they grab the railing? Do they anticipate downwards before they jump over the railing? How much squash happens when they land? You know, rather than think about all of this and iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate in the scene over and over and over and over again, shoot the reference a couple times and then you have it with you and you can use that to build a better, more powerful animation, something that's more readable. It can always be stylized after the fact, but just getting the blocking and the rough pass in there, honestly, I would argue the most important part. Polish and spline and all of that comes after. It's made much easier if you've done the bulk of the legwork in the rough pass.
Well, that's like your skeleton, right? Like that's what you build the house on.
That's right. Or even, you know, when you're doing theater or acting, it's why rehearsal is so important, right? You get all the rough stuff out of the way so that when it's time to do the big shows, you're ready for it. You've practiced it. You know where you're supposed to stand. You know how to deliver that line. You know, you don't need the tape on the floor anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I was saying, you need that strong foundation to make everything else work. And a lot of people want to skip that beginning stuff because the ending feels like such a reward. And I'm assuming this is the same thing in animation. Feels so good to have that final product sitting in front of you, or to finally get that audience in to watch you. But if you've done none of that homework beforehand, everything you do won't read. It just becomes a jumbled mess and nothing makes sense.
It falls flat. Just like we were talking about how if you set the bar too high for yourself and you don't put in the foundational work, you end up with the animation that doesn't read well. Like you say, it doesn't read at all. So you have to put in that little bit of work. And so similar to the style trap, don't try to emulate the style so much as just do the work, do the acting, do the animation. And eventually, the more you do it, the more that you will shine through your work. And this is the same with the reference. The more that you shoot reference and the more animation based on that reference that you do, you're obviously going to get more of you coming through because you're basing your animation off of your own reference. So it's stylized after yourself. So you're developing your own style at the same time. For the love of everything, please, oh please, animation students and graduates out there, shoot reference, please.
Now, when it comes to animation in your reference, should you be looking for, I guess maybe depends on your style. Are you looking towards like a big movement to capture, like an exaggerated tableau, or is it
anything? Honestly, anything. If you're sitting at a diner, if this animation shot is a character sitting at a diner and they're drinking a cup of coffee, you know, it's like, how many times does this character fidget with their coffee spoon? Do they shrug their shoulders? How do they look around the room when they're having a casual conversation? Film yourself doing it a couple times. If you have dialogue in your shot, like record yourself saying the dialogue. If you're make sure that you do that. Shoot the reference, because even if it's not the way that you want to do it the first time, you can shoot it again and again and again. You don't need any special equipment. You shoot it on your phone. Everybody's got a phone. The reference work is so, so important. And I work in video games now. A lot of the work that I do is from motion capture, which is effectively reference, right? It's real actors, real people in suits doing real movements. And when I come in and clean them up after, and I stylize the animation after the fact, right? The foundational work is already there. And the timing often is already there because the animation director is, giving instructions and making sure that the actors are moving in a certain way. If you're curious about this sort of thing, watch the behind the scenes stuff for the newest God of War video game, because they go through the whole motion capture process and how different it was being an animator in the motion capture suit to being a professional actor or weapons specialist in the suit, right? The difference is palpable. And then when an animator gets their hands on that, the rough work's already done, so they can clean it up a little bit. But then the biggest job for the animator is to retime it, to stylize it, to change the weighting, so that when Kratos punches somebody, it really feels like Kratos punched somebody. Not an actor in a suit. Not saying that an actor in a suit can't punch hard, but this is Kratos, right? You're trying to get that God of War, the big hits, and everything is punchy, crunchy, and it's good. But just from a film point of view, you're going to want to shoot that video reference. And then in video games, a lot of the time now, you're getting that live reference in the form of motion capture. You're never really animating blind. I mean, even think of the way that Andy Serkis does his films now, like The Jungle Book, and all of the people in suits who are doing the animal acting. And I'm sure you have something to say about that. But I mean, they're even shooting reference for themselves as animals. They're still probably going to look at videos of animals for reference that they can animate later. But as an actor, that's still some important stuff to do, to do the legwork, to understand how this moves, why they move that way, or why that worked.
Yeah, so as an actor, when you're building your foundation, and you sort of need this to help you find your style as well. But when you're building your foundation, there's 3 things that you really need to pay attention to. 1 is your body, 2 is your voice, 3 is your imagination. Those are the 3 most important things that an actor needs. Those are your 3 tools that you need to become successful in the business. When you're talking about Andy Serkis and doing all the animal acting, one technique that all the acting programs I've been part of has dived into is what they call animal work. Animal work is a total body-based exercise, and it sort of helps you get out of the normal human way of walking and moving through the world. Simply all it is, going on YouTube and picking an animal that you think matches the character that you want to present, and becoming it physically and mentally. It sounds easier than what it is, but what makes it stand out and what makes a good actor from a bad actor is being specific with everything you're doing. How does the mouth of a crab work based on how your mouth works? How does a gorilla move based on how you move? It's all relative. 2 examples that really stand out in the film world that you can go out and check. You might not have known this until I tell you now, but these were 2 performances based entirely on animal work. The first one is Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura. He is a parrot. The parrot was the inspiration for the character. Now go watch the movie again if you haven't seen it, and look at how he moves his head. It's the exact same way a parrot moves. The other one is Anthony Hopkins, award-winning actor, going back to like day 1 basic animal work. For Silence of the Lambs, he was a lizard when he's playing Hannibal Lecter. He's a lizard. And if you go and watch it, there are moments where you see him become a lizard, now that you know this.
The unblinking.
The unblinking, and just the way he stands completely still. Like if you turn on the light and you see like a salamander on your wall, they stand still. And then when you try to move in, that's when they like do like a really quick movement, but they're so still for so much of it. That's the basics of body work. That's one basic of body work is animal work. So like, yeah, Andy Serkis playing a bunch of monkeys. He studied how monkeys move, and now when he moves as a monkey, and the effects guys put a monkey over his green screen, like Alex was saying, most of the work is already done because he's already moving like a monkey. So not much they have to do after that. That's one technique all actors should sort of take with them, and that's one of the things I will use when I'm getting stuck trying to make a character interesting. I'll think about a type of animal that fits the character I'm trying to create, and I'll watch videos of that animal to see if I'm right. Because it could be something as simple as the way you move your head, could be something as complicated as how you move your entire body. It's worth looking into, and it's worth, again, just saying yes to the idea of it, even if it sounds ridiculous. If you're like, how can a penguin help my Viking? I don't know. I can't tell you. But if it can work, yes, try it. Please try it. Don't say no. Please invest in it and try it. When it comes to your voice in general is you could probably spend hours digging into and finding all the ins and outs of it. What I just want to talk about right now is how you use your voice to help you with your style. Because this one is very, very, very true with me. So one of the very basics of script work when it comes to acting is what they call verbs. So what that essentially means is that if you get dialogue in a script and Alex is person 1 and I'm person 2, whatever Alex says to me, I will pick with my one line, I will put a verb next to it, which is something I'm trying to get out of Alex. It's not about what I'm trying to do, it's about what I'm trying to get. It involves Alex completely. And the two basic verbs that I use until I work the scene a few times and find better ones, but if I don't know what I'm doing, I pick one of these two because they're polar opposites, is push and pull. So with my line, am I trying to push Alex away or am I trying to pull him towards me? Think about it for a second. It will make sense because from push and pull, you'll get other things like I'm going to hit Alex with this line. I'm going to lure Alex with this line. It all kind of breaks down into better verbs, but the very bare basics of it for me, when I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I know I want to pull Alex in, I'm just going to say it's a pull for now. And then as we work the scene, I go, oh, wait. What would be a stronger idea would be lure or would be entice.
Did I hear you
and they call verbs because you just...
treasure?
What? Treasure? You could use treasure. Yeah, you could maybe.
No. What I mean is like if you're trying to draw me in, right? It's
do I
all
have
on
treasure?
It's all on the line delivery.
Right? Exactly. Well, and that's what the verbs do, right? They influence your how you say the line, yeah, where your inflection is. It completely influences because now you're thinking as the character, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to poke Alex? Am I going to poke him with this line? And then how you poke with a line would be different than how you slap with a line. I mean, hello is perfect, right? Because you have hello, and then you have hello.
Hey.
It's the same line, just said differently because I'm trying to pull you in. I'm trying to push you away. But again, those are just the bare basics. There's much better lines or much better verbs you can use with these lines.
That's really cool. I like that just based on the way that you put emphasis on certain words, especially in your line delivery, it can change the context completely.
Entirely. It changes everything. What's actually really fun is if you already know the scene, like if you're doing like a romantic scene with somebody, what's a fun exercise if you ever get the chance to do it is change all your verbs to the opposite of what they should be. So if everything I'm doing is trying to pull her in, if I change it to pushing her away, it'd be like the scene instantly becomes comedy. It's awesome.
Right. There's that really famous study of the line delivery, but like 7 different ways you put emphasis on a different word each time. And the sentence is, I never said she took my money, but then you emphasize each word differently on every line. So I never said that she took my money.
I never said she took my money.
Right. It changes the context every time, and it's so cool.
Yeah, it's little simple things like that a lot of actors who are looking for the end game kind of forget. Enjoy the simplicity and the basics of it. And if you want to reference, you could always just use Google and stuff. Not all verbs are created equally. Some verbs don't work for this type of exercise. So if you want to, there's actually a really good book that my school recommended. It's called Actions. And it's just a list of verbs that really work for actors and acting scenes. It's gold. It's really gold. But again, like, I just go with the very bare basic ones personally for me. But maybe I need to up my game. Maybe that's one of the things I'm missing in my repertoire, is sort of getting my verb game up to kind of help me get what I want across in a scene better. And again,
get your Mad Lib game going.
Mad Lib. But again, I just want to emphasize the importance of these verbs is for the other actor. It's not about you. Acting should never be about you. It should be about the other person in the scene.
This is that black hole thing coming back again, right? Do you want to push or pull, right? You want to be able to feed off of their energy. You want to be able to... It's this interesting reciprocal relationship where it's you have to draw off the energy that they're giving to you, but you also have to feed them at the same time.
Well, and it prevents you from being a selfish actor, because like a lot of actors who go on stage and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the next Chris Pratt, and they're just so concentrated on making sure that they come off in a certain way and that they look a certain way, they're completely disconnected from the scene and their scene partners, and then the entire thing just falls apart because they're so wrapped up in their own stuff. So what they should do, give the other actor something to work off of, because once you guys are both doing that, that's when that's when the gold stuff happens on stage. That's when the gold stuff happens in front of the camera, is that you're working together. I've had experiences on film sets where the other actor is so focused on themselves, that's when you end up doing like 16 takes, because you're not working together. One person's in for themselves and it just doesn't work. But when you work with the other people in the scene and you all understand, okay, this is what the scene is, this is what the joke is, these are all the parts that we play in the joke, and you're all working off each other to help. Like, if I know that Alex is the straight man in the scene and it's a comedic scene, I'm going to go out of my way to be as absurd as possible so that he has something to work off of with his reactions. Just like if I know that we're doing a horror scene and he's the one who's supposed to get scared, I'm going to work towards making sure that he has everything he needs so he doesn't have to fight to look scared. He just can already get there a lot easier. It's not about being selfish, it's about the other actor. That's why you want to have these verbs in. And then the last foundation I was talking about is your imagination. I think that kind of goes without too much saying of what I mean by that, but it did take me a little while to completely grasp it in a scene, because you keep on thinking about all the things like, oh, my lines, where am I standing, what am I doing? But you have to actually like really visualize when you're on set and see the things that you're talking about. I remember one in particular, I was doing this exercise and my teacher was noticing that like I wasn't connecting to the words I was saying. And so she was like, you have to see the words you're saying. And so she made me physically act it out. And I remember it was like a romantic scene and I was talking about this meadow with the girl. And the teacher's like, I don't believe that you see a meadow. Like describe the meadow. And so I just start talking about like what's in the meadow. And she's like, act it out. Act out the meadow. And I remember I did this thing where it's like, oh, like there's like trees out in the back and then this little deer hops out, and I hopped out as the little deer, and then the deer looked around and then the deer got scared and ran back into the woods. And it's just like once I did that absurdness of like, I'm going to pretend to be a baby deer in this like serious romantic scene. Once I did that, I connected to everything made sense, and the scene got better. So sometimes you need to help your imagination out by kind of feeding it with the rest of yourself, because you know what these things are, and you just got to manifest your imagination into reality sometimes to sort of help you get to where you need to be as an actor. So again, it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, where you have to say yes to everything. It sounded stupid. I'm doing this serious love scene and I'm going to prance around like a little deer, which doesn't make any sense, but then it works. And I just had a memory just popped in my head now. I was doing a more serious scene. I can't remember the show, but it was me and my sister. And I remember that there was this moment in it where, and the other actress I was working with, she's amazing, we were kind of having trouble connecting. And so there's one time we were doing it, and I was talking about, we're talking about our father and all these bad things he does. And I had this line that's like he was acting like a big old bear. And I was sort of saying it really real, like every single time we did it before. But then one time I just got the impulse to try to make her laugh with it. Like I was going to pull her in. That would be my verb. But the goal of making her smile. And so once I did that, and I did like a big old bear, and I did like a bear voice and kind of moved my hands around, she saw it and she giggled. And it was the most real reaction we've ever had working on that scene. It taught me about the character too. And I thought like, oh, is this guy attracted to his sister? And so once that like seed got planted, I was like, I'm going to try to play that up and see where this goes, because I trusted the other actor and she trusted me. And our scene, which started off so rough for so many weeks, just got a lot more interesting, and there was a lot more playfulness going on, and it actually became something really fun by the end of it. I used my verb of pulling her in. I said yes. I trusted it. And that's when stuff started to happen. That's when all of our blockades went away. And that's when you start getting the scene work done. That's when you can start to work on the finer things after that.
There is that real vulnerability, though, with there's that fear in being vulnerable, right? Or to show humility in some sort of way. My wife, she has this really good analogy. Imagine it's your first time going paddleboarding, right? So you're standing up on a paddleboard and you have your paddle, you're leashed onto the board. Water's a little bit choppy, you're not used to it. You're afraid of falling in the water, right? So you find yourself really stiff and you're wobbly. And she says that the best thing that you can do is fall in the water, get back up on your board, and you'll realize it's not so bad.
Yeah.
And then from then on, you're a lot more relaxed, right?
Well, and I mean, like, theater school in particular, but like any kind of theater space, they make it a safe space because they want you to be able to fall off that paddleboard and get back in. They want you to make mistakes so that you understand that, like, oh, hey, not every choice I make is a mistake. It's okay to make these weird choices sometimes. It's important.
How else are you supposed to grow if you can't make mistakes?
Yeah, I'm going to butcher this quote, but mistake is just another word we have for learning, I think is what it is. Like, that applies, like, how can you learn if you don't make mistakes? As an animator, pencils have erasers, correct?
Yes, of course they do. And just any 3D software has Control Z. I mean, undo is a real thing. And if we didn't have it, there would be a lot more bad animation out there, let me tell you. With style and technique, shooting your reference, I think we've kind of hit all the keynotes that we need to hit. Right? A lot of it is be vulnerable, be willing to take that risk, be willing to fail, because unless you actually try it and fail, you won't know. You won't have tried. And you really, really need to, especially from an animation perspective. If you're really struggling with a shot, try acting it out. Shoot reference. Do the shot. And you'll see why it's working or why it's not working. You can get extra eyes on it and you can get feedback that way. But I'm sure it's the same with acting, right? That's why they have the clacker board or the clap board, right? Take one, take two, because the first shot didn't work. You got feedback from the director or your acting partner, whoever. Take two, still didn't work. 160 takes later, who knows, right? Maybe you finally got it that time. And that's the keeper. That's the wrap. It's the same with animation. Sometimes you have to shoot your reference a bunch of times because the first time you shot it, you sucked. Or the first time you shot it, like, you tripped. Or, you meant to lean on this one prop and the prop moved and it created this comedic moment that wasn't supposed to be there. But then suddenly it's like, that's a perfect thing. And then you throw it in your shot. You have this little happy accident, right? So it's really, really important to be using reference as much as possible when you're animating, but use your reference smartly. And what I mean by that is don't get caught in the style trap that we were talking about earlier. It's okay to try and emulate a style as a learning tool, or if you're looking to do something very specific for a project or an animation, that's fine. But if you want to develop your own style, it has to come through you. And we've been kind of beating the dead horse with the stick here, but unless you actually do, none of you is going to come through.
I like that. One thing I want to touch it because you made a good you unlocked something in my brain that's really good advice.
I have the keys.
Talking about with the clapper, when you're like scene take 1, take 2, take 3. So when you go into an audition and you've prepared the night before, you were up all night, you worked it all out, and you figured out all your verbs, you got it all figured out. You go in, you do the audition. And they're like, oh, that was great, but can you blah, 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 blah. Do not do the exact same thing again. That is a huge trap that a lot of actors fall into, where you spent all night working on this thing, you think you know exactly what's going on, you think it's perfect, so you're gonna like, okay, I want to go in and do this, and then they tell you it's not, and they tell you to do something different, and you're like, oh crap, what am I gonna do? First thing I do when that happens to me, I change my verbs. I change my verbs right away in my head. Or because based on what they say, obviously, if the director, if all their note is, oh, like, oh, hey, can you just give a pause between these two lines? It's like, okay, yeah, that's easy. So do the exact same thing, just add that pause in. But if they say something like, oh, yeah, like that was great, but it's more like this. So if I'm doing it and I'm doing it like really cheerful and they're like, oh, no, it's a bit darker than that. Can you darken it up? Then I just go, okay, so if I'm being cheerful, that means I'm pulling with a lot of my verbs. So let's maybe like, instead of pull in, maybe I'm just going to entice in, depending on what it is. Or maybe it has to be something more like a push. And then I go with the push. Again, it depends on exactly what the casting director says, or what the producer says, or what the writer says, depending who's in the room. But do not do the same thing again. If you do the same thing again, they're not going to think highly of you. They're going to think you're a bit of a hack. They're going to think you're one note. And you don't want the one note, because then they'll only see you for that thing. And that might not even be the thing you're really good at. You want to show them that you can take direction. You need to show them. And the quickest way, in my opinion, to take direction is to just change your verbs on the spot.
Be vulnerable.
Well, yeah, you have to be. In the creative world in general, if it's painting, music, poetry, acting, animation, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. If you can't put yourself out there, try things, fail, and then learn, then succeed, then that's it. Like, if you can't take criticism, do not even begin this journey. It is so important for you to be able to hear that what you did was trash. I've heard it in classes where teachers have just like put down their hands. They're just like, well, that wasn't very good, was it? And it's like, no, it wasn't. And so then you kind of figure out, okay, like this doesn't work. And like, you'll be upset at the time. Like I remember specifically just being so angry and talking to anybody for the rest of the day. But then it's like, okay, well, now I have to completely change what I'm doing, And so then when class was over and I went back to work on it, I was like, okay, I was doing all this. I'm going to just tear this all off the wall. I'm going to start from square one. What's my body doing? What's my voice doing? Is my imagination engaged? And then once you start to build up those foundations again, all those other things that come after that are easier to fit in. And then, yeah, the next day I did it. They're like, much better, and that's all you can hope for from it didn't work to go into much better. Hey, that's a gold star to this guy.
Yeah, I feel like that's transcendent of the industry as well, right? Like, don't get married to your ideas.
Oh yeah,
we talked about it when we were doing the pitch development before, but sometimes you conceptualize something and it seems so perfect, but then you put other eyes on it and it's like, nope, that's garbage. You need to be able to tear it away or rip up that page and start all over again. Right? But it's important that you do finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as I say yes, there is a certain level where you can start to say no. And by level, I don't mean like, oh, now that I'm Scarlett Johansson, I could say no. I mean it in the sense of, if what they're asking you to do goes against your morals or it goes against your foundation.
Oh yeah, no, that's not what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that at all.
No, for sure. I know you're not. I just wanted to clarify in case somebody thought that. Where it's like there's a certain level of like where you can absolutely say no. I said it earlier, right? Like if you're in a classroom setting and all of a sudden your teacher or your director or whoever is like, you know what? I think you have to be topless for this scene, and you don't want to do it. Say no. You have all the right in the world to say no to something like that.
You absolutely stand your ground for your morals and your virtues.
Yeah.
Right? You have to put your own integrity first.
Yeah.
Right? You can choose to have a bit of humility and be vulnerable, but not at the cost of your own integrity, not at the cost of your own dignity.
Yeah, because I mean, it depends where the no is coming from, right? Is the no coming because you're scared of... is it coming from a place because you're scared of trying something new, or is it coming because it's just like you're morally objective? Again, another flashback just happened to my brain at school. We had a project where we had to find a painting, and then from that painting we create a character based on it. And I found this guy's portrait of his friend, and his friend looked like a crazy psychopath that lived in the woods and like 8 teenagers. So I was like, I'm going to use this project to have fun, and I'm just going to be like a psycho killer and just do whatever I want. and I, s- I literally scared one of my teachers because she was like, I didn't know you were going to do that, and so when you started to do that, I didn't know what to think. I mimed bringing in like a dead body and then throwing it on a table and then slowly decapitating it and like doing all this other.
Yikes.
Yeah, I did all this like gross stuff to it, and they didn't expect it. Like they saw like I came in kind of looking kind of crazy, and they're like, okay. And it was so different from everything else that everyone else was doing. And one of the notes my teacher gave to me at the end of the project, he's like, I wanted to tell you to do something different, but you were having so much fun that I was like, let's just let's let Mark have fun with this project. Let's just let Mark have fun. And I was like, okay, cool. But there was one class we did where we took the painting and we sat in front of the class, and the class all asked you questions, and you had to answer it. And I wasn't answering any of the questions because I didn't feel like it fit my character. And then the teacher was like, Mark, you have to answer them. Like, answer them now. And like exactly what he said. I said yes to it, and then I started answering the questions, and the character got better because of it. You know, like this was me saying no for a bad reason. But once I got past that and said yes to it, then this like brilliant thing came out of it. And actually, like one of the guys in my class, he asked me some question. He asked me, what do you want to do right now? I just looked him in the eyes and was like, I want to rip your jaw off and put it on my mantle. The way you said that to me, I was gonna beat you up. And I was like, whoa. So it just adds this like new layer to the character development that I was already doing, that I was neglecting because I was too precious about the project. That's why I shouldn't have said no. If my teachers told me that my character was actually a woman in disguise and I didn't feel that was morally correct, then I would say no to that. As interesting of an idea that could be, it's not what the foundation of the character was for me, and it would have changed too much of what I brought to class.
It would have been a different painting.
It would have been a completely different thing, right? Yeah, like that's you telling me to now do Salvador Dali paintings as opposed to the one I found, and
Right.
it's like, no, that's not what this project was for me. This is what this project is. So saying no to something like that makes more sense to me than saying no to answering questions. So
Yeah, and like just be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to be open to the suggestion, right? Don't shut down the suggestion just because you think you have it on lockdown. Man, that got dark there at the end.
sorry.
Let's finish this with a little rainbow here.
Yeah, let's
Any
do it.
final thoughts?
Yeah, basically, I think if you want to get into the world of acting, you have to spend a lot of time on your basics. You have to be willing to be open. You have to be willing to say yes. And you have to explore so much. I just gave you like 3 quick things based on my own personal experience of like what was sort of important for my foundations. But there's so much more I left out. We could talk about it maybe later on. But for now, just be open, say yes, and just believe everything you're doing. What about yourself, Alex? What's some final words?
Just as we talked about before, shoot your reference, do the grunt work, get the rough stuff done before you even try to polish the edges. Never ever try to start with a polished piece of work. Always do the rough stuff first. Shoot your reference, act it out, be the character. You know, maybe you'll have that happy accident, that comedic moment that you weren't expecting, and it'll make your shot better, more powerful. Your animation will become something cool. And then don't get caught in the style trap. Don't worry so much about what other people's styles are doing. If you think that's a great style, you know, it's okay to emulate as a form of learning, but the more that you do something like animation, the more of you is eventually going to start coming out of that animation. So definitely style is a good thing to use as reference, but the best way to get your own style is to just do. Thanks everybody for joining us today for the Frames for Thought podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll say goodbye for now. So we'll see you later. And until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. The Frames for Thought podcast uses royalty-free music from RKDC and Track Tribe. Thanks for listening.